It's great to welcome back to the program Frank Meeink. Frank is the former neo-Nazi who was misidentified, or I guess who I was misidentified as on CNN Headline News, Dr. Drew's show several years ago. That's how Frank and I got in touch, and he's been on the program a number of times. We've talked about his autobiography, Recovering Skinhead. We've talked about so many different aspects of what we're seeing now in terms of the resurgence of some of these white supremacist and white nationalist groups. Frank, it's been a crazy couple of weeks within the white supremacist, white nationalist movement. When you saw in the wake of the Charlottesville, Virginia incident, Donald Trump talking about there's fine people on both sides, etc. Were there indirect signals being sent to some of the groups that you used to be a part of?
I mean, he validated it. If I was the head of the group if I was the head of the group now, and that would happen like that, I mean, what a the president of the United States just validated us by saying we are good people and we are good. You know what we stand for is good. The Friday night, those guys marched and were saying the Jews can't replace us. The whole group of them, that are good people. Now, I do go on the fact that there are good people in all human beings, and we have the chance to find them, but we have to at least identify the problem, own the problem, and then we can fix it. I mean, he's saying that these guys are good people, and the night before they're all chanting, "The Jews won't replace us. The Jews won't." So, yeah.
We've talked a little bit about how in 2008, when President Obama was elected, we know about the resurgence in a lot of these groups, and it's pretty easy to understand why. Half black man elected president, you're going to see a resurgence in some of these white supremacist, white nationalist, neo-Nazi groups. However, throughout the Obama presidency, some of them sort of started to peter out a little bit. And then the Trump campaign happened, and the signals being sent to many of these groups. From your contacts, are these groups really experiencing a strong resurgence right now?
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be their new golden age, like just like the early '90s was. The early '90s was the golden age of the neo-Nazis. Is when the neo-Nazis broke away from the old regime of the Klan and all those, and we had that's when I was in it, and we had this great resurgence then, and then they went away. They went away until 2008. In 2008, the numbers grew instantly from election day, and to them, now we could say half black, half white. To them means 100% not white.
Of
That's
course.
it. Right? So, but you got to know that they went dormant for 8 years. They got a big number, a big spike, but everything they kept saying was going to happen didn't happen. Obama didn't come for their guns. He didn't come for their wives. He didn't come, all those things that they said he didn't do. So the group just kind of went more and more back to sleep, but they still kept their numbers, and they still had these huge message boards. Well, when Trump comes along, he's using all these campaign slogans and speeches that are right up their alley. It starts to wake them up. They're like, oh yeah, we can get behind this.
And Frank,
And
as a guy, given that you were a part of these groups historically, can you tell us really specifically which slogans or phrases are the ones that Trump uses that if you are part of a neo-Nazi, white supremacist, or white separatist group, you recognize?
the day he announces for his real candidacy, he says, they come over here, they're drug dealers, murderers, rapists, and I assume some of them are good people. Right there, he had all of them. That's the day he had every one of them. I mean, because that's the same thing they all, like I said, there's always racists who make exceptions. They always go, I hate all black people, except for John. I know John. He's cool. I work with him. All races have to make exceptions to live in this country. You just do. He, right there, just backed that whole thing up, because some Mexicans are okay, or some South Americans, they're okay, but most of them are rapists, drug dealing, gang, thug, criminals. And it's completely the opposite way, of course. So.
What's another example of the phrasing that Trump has used, which knowingly or not knowingly, I mean, I genuinely have no idea, not that it matters, is a sort of signal to white supremacists?
Oh, affirmative action. He talked about that probably about 3-4 weeks into real campaigning. He started talking about the affirmative action thing, which so many misinformed people, I was one of them back then, about what this really is. And so we should all just be taken on our merit. We don't need a program to help them get, because obviously they didn't start to race later than we did in this thing. But anyway, so when he starts talking about affirmative action, is another big sign that he's on their side. And now if you have the facts, and I know you do, about affirmative action, it isn't this, you have to take this guy over a white guy. It's that we have to get people in. The great case is the one in California with the fire department. They had made affirmative action come in. They had to start taking some black guys on to this force. And everyone was like, why should I make a guy who's less qualified be the guy who helped save my life in a fire? Now, granted, there was no lineage of fire department or firefighters that were black in that area. So now we're trying to change that. And they don't get that type of stuff. They think, and that's what I used to say back in the day, my recruiting days. Why? I didn't grow up special. I grew up hard as anyone. I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth. Why should anyone else get above me? Well, because see, I can hide that in a job interview. A black dude can't hide that he's a black dude, So that was the facts that I knew and started to change my views. But I heard Donald saying the same things I used to say when I was not as informed. That is so up their alley.
Hey, Frank, I want to talk a little bit about how you were sort of pulled into this entire there's fine people and bad people on both sides thing. You were brought on to, remind me which Fox News program it was?
Oh, it was Martha. It's the Martha show.
Martha McCallum, right? I believe it is.
Yes, who I like her, actually. Yeah. And she's not,
Tremendous person, unbelievable person. But listen, here's the thing that happened.
They changed the host on the day of the interview. Go ahead.
You were brought onto this program, and you were told that you were being brought on. Why and to talk about what?
I was being brought on to help talk to people that are in the alt-right about why the alt-right could be bad and why the alt-right is different than just the conservative groups, right? So I'm like kind of touchy with this as it is, and so that's why I was brought on to explain why people are so joining the alt-right right now. That's what they told me.
And of course, you're positioned as someone who understands some aspects of the ideology that is in the alt-right through your history in the white supremacist movement, neo-Nazi movement, etc. You show up there, and what happens during the interview?
Okay, I got to set up one more part where they said, I told them, and this has been my thing I've been standing on all the last 2 weeks, is when I was a neo-Nazi, I would march in these rallies, and I said this on your show before, and people would throw bottles at us. Antifa, all these groups, they throw bottles at us. I never ducked the bottle and was like, whoa, I got to rethink my beliefs here. Like, I never did that. It doesn't work, right? So that was kind of my key thing. Like, we don't need more violence against these guys. It's not working. It's what they want. So that's what I was going on to say.
Okay.
They bring me on. They have a guy who was a former, Antifa member, and he still was actually part of the group, and he's a pretty cool guy, actually. So I didn't even know that until I get on the show, and they text me and say, oh, here's another guest that's going to be on, and I look him up. Don't have time to really Google him, look him up, and they get him on, and he comes right at me because they kind of told him I was against him.
Okay, so let's slow, just to make sure the audience knows what you're saying. As far as you knew until right before this appearance, you were going to be the only guest during this segment. And just before the interview takes place, you're told there's a former Antifa guy or current Antifa guy?
Former. And he now tries to get them out of the group.
Tries to get people to leave Antifa. Okay. Yep. And so then during the interview, you're put in this position to what? Criticize Antifa?
Yeah. Yeah, you can see they keep trying to set up these questions to me to where it's like, that's what the question is formed. And so when I get into it with them, well, not with him, but with the Fox News person, I'm just like, well, no, they are unorganized. I kept saying, when you know that my comments kept starting with, well, he's correct on the other, he's making a good point. Like I kept saying stuff like that, about the Antifa guy. So I kept doing that until the end when I could just tell that they weren't going to let me talk about what they brought me on to talk about. And then at the end, if you see, that's where I start saying, these guys, they do property damage. The police and the FBI aren't looking at them for major violent crimes. They're still looking at the neo-Nazis and the right. And that's when they're like, all right, see you later, goodbye.
So do you think the idea here was the underlying motive to try to, again, push this narrative that in the same way that we can say, well, Trump said there's good people on both sides, they were trying to create a situation of drawing an equivalency between the bad people on the neo-Nazi side and the bad people on the Antifa side? Is that sort of the false balance they were trying to create?
Absolutely, because for 2 days up until that point, the story had started to turn for them that that the left had started to fight now. So now Fox is running with it, and and they were really running with it. And I thought that Martha would have been different. That's why I kind of agreed to the show, because I really don't want to go on Fox News that much unless they're going to let me talk about Fox News, and they're not going to let me do that. So, because Fox News has been a huge part of the campaign, which kept backing up the narrative that Trump was saying, which was helping the growth of these groups, and they know that. They know that.
What happened after the fact? Did you have communication with producers?
Oh yeah, and I have all the if we can block out the number, I'd love to send them over to you. Where she's like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for you to get set up, and I am not that type of producer. You work at Fox News, you probably are that type of
Well,
producer.
it's so funny because if the producer didn't, who set up the segment, right? Isn't it the producers that set it up?
Yeah. And then she told me that she took off that day. Her and Martha both all of a sudden took off. I mean, I'm not like a big conspiracy guy here, but I feel a little conspiracy here going on. I don't know. I just felt really weird, and they just both backed off, and then they had no contact until they tell me who my other guest is, and then it's some other producer, and I don't know who they are, and then the show starts, and it was brutally horrible, and the segment was supposed to be 5 minutes, and it was 3 because I wasn't saying anything anymore. I'm not going to feed into it to be on TV. I mean, I don't really, I'd rather be coaching hockey. So,
well, we will link to that segment, and that's an incredible situation. And as always, Frank Meeink, former neo-Nazi, of course, his autobiography, Recovering Skinhead. Always great to talk to you, Frank.
Absolutely. Your audience loves me. I looked at some of the things last night. So many people, you should have him on more. You should listen to your audience sometimes, Dave.
Hey, you're back because of that. You're back because of that. All right, Frank, thanks very much.
Thanks, guys. See ya.